From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports Podcast. I am Paul the Prophet Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Baratta. For those of you who are new here, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the love, the 5-star ratings and reviews. I promise we read all of them. I'm humbled by all of them. It's so appreciated when you guys take the time to leave a 5-star rating and review on the podcast. So please do it if you haven't already. And maybe even more importantly, share your favorite podcast episode with a friend. Send it to a colleague. Spread the love. This is how the podcast has continued to grow, and we thank you for it. Jimmy, how you doing this week?
I'm doing great, Paul. And actually, I wanted to jump on that about sharing the podcast with a friend. You know, last week, guys, if you're unaware, we just started a new program called BOE Classics. So many of our great guests, so many of our great episodes from years past that we wanted to reshare with you guys. So it's a separate playlist, hopefully not too intrusive, but we wanted to re-air some of our favorite old episodes that maybe if you're a recent listener, or even myself, who I've been listening for 2-3 years now, but I didn't, hear this one or that one. It's a great opportunity to catch up on some really amazing guests that we've had over the years.
It's a good reminder that we're like 400 plus episodes in here, Jimmy. So I'm sure people have missed a few. And
one or two.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the first one we put out was the fantastic interview with Pete Hines from Bethesda.
That's right. The secret to success, I believe, is what we called it, because Pete was sharing some of their secret sauce over there, and it's definitely not to be missed.
And it's cool because I think he was just recently promoted also.
Shout out, Pete. Congratulations.
There you go. So that's
SVP,
cool.
Sorry, Paul. SVP of Global Marketing and Communications at Bethesda. So yeah, I think that's the new title for him. So yeah, again, big congrats to you, Pete.
And he's a big gamer, like someone who really understands and loves gaming to its core, which is always fun, right? When you get people who are working in the industry and truly love the games also. Jimmy, I wanted to say also, this is, we have really big announcements coming up. We have more content coming up because I've been speaking at a million conferences. So I would love feedback, by the way, on the interviews we've been putting up. Last week, by the way, Lachlan Power, who very famous, YouTuber, Fortnite YouTuber, esports.org owner, great interview with him last week that I did live in Saudi Arabia at the Next World Forum. But curious what our audience thinks about the live interviews, because those have been fun to do at the conferences I've been going to. And I just sent you today a couple more panels that I was on. So we'll keep putting out this content if you guys are enjoying it. It's like you're able to be at all these conferences with us.
Part of the fun, I think, right? You get to hear the Prophet off the cuff live in a room full of people. And the Lachlan one actually was where we pulled him aside, guys, and we did a quick one-on-one. I think it's more snackable for you. I think about 10 minutes or so. And for those that are unfamiliar, Paul, I just given a little background on Lachlan. He also has, I think, 15 million followers or subscribers on his YouTube. So, so it's a pretty insane following, I think, and really awesome insight too, because I don't think you get to be that successful or have a following of that size without, like you mentioned, being not just a gamer at heart, but understanding, I think, the gaming culture, what audiences want, and then obviously providing that to them. So, another one not to be missed. I say that about all of our episodes, but I truly feel that way.
And I love being a tease. And so this Friday, Jimmy, you know this, I'm going to be in a studio filming something very brand new. I can't say more than that. But I'm super excited about what our audience has in store for them, because I'm just I'm so excited about this specific project, and we have another big announcement coming in 1 month from today. So
Paul,
I hate being such a tease, but like on my own show,
as the
what are we
company
gonna
lawyer, I'm going to tell you that yeah, we'll wait a little longer to say these things.
but you may hear things, so I want people to at least get the tease from me first. As long as you're okay with that, Jimmy, of course, as the company lawyer.
Teasing is okay. Well, let's tease our guest for today and maybe bring him in. He's been very patiently waiting backstage for us.
We do. I mean, speaking of esports teams and esports orgs, we have, I think I've said this on a previous podcast. I think Gen.G is really leading the way in terms of thinking, leading the way in terms of doing like the partnerships, how they're thinking about revenue, how they're thinking about all these things. And so we're extremely lucky. We have Gen.G's Chief Revenue Officer on the podcast today, Martin Kim. Martin, welcome to the Business of Esports Podcast.
Thank you guys so much. It's awesome to be here. I was just giggling to myself hearing you guys talk because I keep zoning out like, oh, am I listening to the podcast right now? And then I'm like, oh crap, I have to stand by. Get it together, Martin. But no, it's good to be on the show. Thank you guys. And more importantly, just for owning this voice in the market. It's really helpful. And I know a lot of people tune in, a lot of people use it as a resource. It's also, you guys are talking about sharing with friends, but I've shared your podcast with dozens of people that ask stuff like, hey, can you tell me more about the, esports and the commercial side of it? And I'm like, actually, why don't you just check this out for a little bit? You get a real sense of what it's at. So yeah, just thank you guys for responsibly owning this pillar of the marketplace. And it's really important. So great to be on here.
Thank you,
Martin. I really appreciate you saying that. It's very humbling when you say that. But it's having people like you on the podcast that I think is the power of the show. It's, how do we get the insight and the knowledge out of your head to our audience? And I'd love for you to give our audience a bit of a background on you, just on Martin, right? Like where did you start your career? How did you get into gaming? And why did you get into gaming, I guess?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And I always start this introduction by saying I was never a gamer. I was actually never even a fan of the gaming industry. I was a kid climbing a tree instead of playing Nintendo at home. And then for this fast forward like 20 years, my background is in traditional sports. So I worked in the professional baseball field for almost a decade. And when I was at Major League Baseball, my big boss at the time, he oversaw all international, and he was like the EVP of marketing and growth for Major League Baseball. We have dinner one time in LA, and he goes, "Hey, I'm leaving Major League Baseball." And I'm like, "Why would you do that?" This guy was like, at one point, he was like a think tank behind the commissioner, just a really, really intelligent dude. He goes, "I'm going to go be the CEO of a esports and gaming company." And I'm thinking he's laughing. I'm laughing. I'm like, "Yeah, okay, this is a good one." He goes, "No, really, I am." And he's like, "Why don't you join me?" And that I almost like coughed up my foot at the time. Because again, he knew that that's not really my thing. And I'm passionate about traditional sports, and I still am. But I started doing a lot of homework. And coincidentally, the last project I had at Major League Baseball was running a incognito esports event with a mobile baseball game in Korea to see what the future could be. And this is when it blew my mind. So locally in Korea, it was an event we did with a top mobile baseball game. And we had about 200 registrants to compete in the mobile game. And the final live component was at a studio, and we had like 90 people show up and engage on the broadcast. And I don't know what the numbers were for the actual live stream. In Korea, all parties involved were like, "Yeah, that wasn't very good." But when I recapped that and I reported it to Major League Baseball, they were like, "Oh my God, that was amazing." And I'm like, what's the truth here, right? And I started, that was the interesting and the curiosity that I started pulling on. And then I started learning about, man, this is quite a world. And one thing about traditional sports, one of the biggest topics in every boardroom right now, especially in the more traditional ones like golf and baseball, it's about, hey, we're aging up, but there isn't a backfill of the marketplace, right? A healthy cycle for anything is like when you're aging up, you have a backfill of that younger generation coming in. But with the viewers and the engagements in the more traditional sports, it's not there. This isn't breaking news, right? Everyone knows certain engagements are going down, and everything is going towards digital and gaming. That's where the 15 to 25-year-olds right now are paying attention to. So, I told myself, hey, for me to be relevant in what I do for the next 10, 20 years, I need to learn this big movement. And 3 years ago, myself included, there was sort of an exodus of traditional sports guys coming over to esports and gaming, right? And so I was one of them, but more importantly, I followed Chris. Oh, his name was Chris. I'm a big believer that any job that you have to really be able to respect that vertical, right? Like when you look up, you look at your bosses, your investors, like if you're not challenged by them, it's not going to be a fun job, right? Whenever I speak in colleges and stuff, I always say, if you're ever at a job and you feel like you can do your boss's job better, that's actually not a good place to be in, right? Because you really limit your growth, and I really do believe that. So when I saw Gen.G's sort of upbringing, it was at its infancy then. It didn't take long for me to say, you know what, I can probably be in the same ship with these guys, and no, I'm never going to sink. So I made that crossover then. It's been almost 4 years. No regrets. I'm still not an avid gamer. And I realized that for my part of the job, I really don't have to be, because I have resources like you guys to be able to learn sort of the Cliff Notes version of things. No, I'm just playing. I definitely know it a lot more and into a really deep level than I did before. It just so happens that I'm not good at games, so I can't call myself a gamer. But a long-winded introduction, but that's how I got to be where I am. Yeah.
Martin, I'm curious. The background in traditional sports is always interesting. We always talk about the connection between, we lovingly call them meat sports here. So between meat sports and esports. And there's a sort of this long-standing debate we've been having on the show, which maybe you've heard, maybe you haven't, which is, are the traditional sports teams owners playing offense or defense when it comes to esports, in your mind? In other words, are they looking at esports going, here's this massive opportunity to reach a younger crowd. We have to go after this. We see, huge growth in this part of the market and we want to go after it. Or is it, we're scared of this, we don't really know what's going to happen here, our business is aging. And I think we had talked on a previous podcast, I think Major League Baseball, the average viewer is like 55 years old now. And is it fear that's making them jump into esports sort of as a hedge, right? As a defensive play, just in case this thing takes off, just in case their business ages too much? How would you categorize the way meat sports owners look at esports? Is it offensive, or is it defensive?
You know what? You're not going to like this answer, but it's really split. When you look at, the dozens and dozens of traditional meat sports owners in every sport, and it's really telling by how they run their organization, right? Some sort of family-owned teams, you can just look at the entire business ops. They're very conservative and they just like to cruise, right? For them, it's like, we've owned this team. It was part of the family. We don't plan on making a ton of money because we're already super rich. Like, why touch that? It's like having a restaurant down the street that gets packed every Thursday, Friday, Saturday. The interior is not so good, but why touch it when it's a cash cow for you, right? But then when you look at the orgs that have like the more venture back, right? The ones that know business to a different dimension, they're already there. Whether it's through their sports org or through a side investment, they're already in this somehow in some way. Like, 3.5, 4 years ago, when this big investment boom happened in gaming and esports, that's when you read all of those headlines, right? Like so-and-so, this NBA player, that celebrity, this org, they all put money in it. And they're the more forward-thinking ones. And if you were to do a comparison, the organizations they represent are usually the more forward-thinking organizations already. They're the ones that are doing things with NFTs, and they're the ones that are doing challenging the league, and they're the ones that have different programming within their org, and they sort of leverage their IP differently. So it really comes down to the DNA of that individual or ownership group. And then now if you trickle down to the league, it comes down to which, in that boardroom, right? In that boardroom with the 20 to 30 owners, which ones are winning, right? So when you look at like the NBA and the 2K League, I applaud the hell out of them for even doing this thing, right? Granted, we can talk for hours about the pros and cons of the 2K League, but the fact that they launched that and they are experimenting that with real money and real moves, I love it. I love that they're doing that, right? But then some other leagues, they've been talking about it for 3-4 years now, and who knows how this unfolds. But it really comes down to a few internal champions and how loud they can be.
Is there anything, Martin, that you took from your life in traditional sports that has applied directly to esports, or have you had to sort of do a complete rethink of how you approach, biz dev, doing partnerships, et cetera? Like, I'm curious, how much of your old life has transferred over?
Initially, so when I talked about that big exodus of a lot of traditional sports people coming over to gaming and esports, if you look at them now, half of them went back and half of them are doing really well. I think the ones that adapted and quickly realized, so it's less of a thing now, but when I came on back in 2000, 2019, 18, remember the whole classic is esports or sports, like that was still a thing. Like people were still talking about that and discussing that. And, and I thought my first homework was I have to come and take a side. And then my side was, who cares, right? That was my conclusion. Who cares? It's two very different things. So I feel like the ones who adapted quickly and said, oh, esports is actually really different than traditional sport. You can't take that template and put it on here and be successful. Therefore, let's quickly pivot and find our own business models. Those survived, and those people are doing really well. The ones who couldn't adapt went back and said, oh man, esports is so weird and so different. So that's sort of the decision making that had to take place. So for me personally, there was a bit of a learning curve, especially coming from baseball, because baseball is a little old school, right? So if you came from, say, I don't know, the NBA is always a little edgier. They're probably a little more quick to adapt. But for me, there were a few differences that hit me in the face as soon as I understood and I made them part of this business. It was easy for me to adjust. So what do I take from my past job is probably the way I treat the clients. That still has been unchanged. That's part of my characteristics, because at the end of the day, the ones who are making the decision on the client side, they're the same people. So you can't be different just because the platform is different, right? So I'm very, very traditional in that sense, right? I still sometimes like to dress up and go to a meeting, and I still do the fancy handshakes and do all that, because I feel like, while our industry is kind of unique, they're not. A lot of them still make the decisions, and they report into the same boardroom and the same C-level that need to approve every budget. So I think that side of me hasn't changed much.
So following that train of thought, Martin. Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
Paul.
no, Jimmy. I just think it's super insightful, and I don't want that lost on our audience, right?
Yeah.
Business, sales, biz dev, it's still business
Inherent.
at its core, even if it's esports, and it's still human to human. And all of those soft skills, all of that stuff that you would have done, at Major League Baseball, definitely still apply here. Sorry, Jimmy, go ahead.
No, worth restating for sure. And I wanted to follow that train of thought a little further, Martin, because, for our listeners, I wanted to get more of an understanding of what those responsibilities and how that's applied, like how those skills are applied in your day-to-day, what the responsibilities of a chief revenue officer are, the successes that you're having or through Gen.G or through, again, applying, I think, those core characteristics of your own business background. But would love to hear more about, I think, the job itself.
Well, I had to go about this it could be a whole different session as well. But, chief revenue officer, what does it really mean? Like, is it one of those jobs that really what the job title says. Basically, what I tell people is, like, it's a fancy title for pretty much saying, Martin, go out there and find us some money. That's what it is, right? Go out there, leverage Gen.G, leverage our esports teams, leverage our other business sort of units, and then try to find partnerships or people that are willing to say, oh, that's a good idea. Here's some money. Let's make it better. And at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, right? You can boil every business decision down to the core. It's very simple. Marketing is very simple. It's just you need more people to pay attention. That's what it is, right? Revenue comes down to you need to put yourself out there so that someone else is willing to pay for some of the stuff you want to do. It's just kind of like you boil it down. So my job title, I mean, in some ways it's like a fancy title, but it really comes down to the creativity and how much do I want to put myself out there and put Gen.G out there and make bold decisions together. And at the end of the day, it's a win-win situation. Sometimes it's a win-win-win situation. That's what a strategic partnership becomes, is all parties involved have to walk away with something saying that added value to my business. So that's what it is at its core. If you want to look under the hood a little bit, Gen.G, one thing that makes us unique is that we do a lot of different things, and the IP of Gen.G means 3 different things in 3 different markets. Like in Korea, we are one of the top esports brands. So we treat things a lot more like a traditional sponsorship, right? Like our League of Legends team. I don't know when this is airing, but knock on wood, we have one of the most dominant League of Legends teams in the last 10 years. And therefore, and because the market is more mature in Korea, we're able to go out there and treat it like a traditional asset and say, hey, we have this awesome team, competitive, a lot of followers, a lot of fans, people watch us, people listen to us. So, why don't you put your brand somewhere around that halo and you'll get some visibility. That's a really easy transaction, right? In North America, we're not the same. We don't have those sexy big teams that compete at the highest levels. But what we have here is a really mature and established collegiate and education business that a lot of us don't know about. We also have this, I call it like a digital agency of gaming business that most people don't know about, which is we go to a lot of the top brands and we together say, hey, what do you want to do in esports and gaming, and let us be a solution for you. And we've been really successful at that. But again, it's really behind the scenes stuff, which is okay, right? Because at the end of the day, what matters is how healthy is our business, how much revenue can we really generate, and how much of that can we use to do what we want to do, right? As a business, sometimes you got to do things that you're not comfortable with to pay for things you really want to do. So that's sort of what we've been doing for the past 3-4 years, and it's worked. We're not maybe as big and sexy as some of the bigger esports orgs in North America, but when you kind of peel things back, we're extremely healthy right now. Yeah.
Martin, just such another great insight that I talk about all the time to like would-be entrepreneurs is just people get religious, right, about their product. No, we're an esports team, right? We're not gonna do consulting. We're not gonna do agency. I'm like, but you're a business, right? Like your business, the survival and viability of your business is what should matter, not religion around what exactly your product is. And I think that's really smart and something that people need to take more to heart. Sorry, Jimmy, I know you wanted to.
And don't get me wrong, we're not gonna sell our soul for something, right? But I think something that our current CEO Arnold and Kevin Chio, our chairman, something that they're really good at is they give us really fine parameters, right? They're big parameters. They say, here's your sandbox, grow it. As long as you're within those target lines, be as creative as you can. And if the output is revenue, if the output is strong marketing, that's cool. But yeah, I mean, to your point, Paul, we have to, at the end of the day, someone's got to pay the bills.
Well, I do want to give a shout out to Arnold Herr. He was on the episode, or on our podcast episode 251, and did share a little bit of this insight, Martin. I love that we're getting a deeper explanation, I think, with just because of the added time that we have together. So if you haven't listened to that yet, guys, episode 251 with Arnold Herr, who Martin just mentioned, CEO of Gen.G. Martin, you had mentioned, again, just trying to find money, right? And doing what it takes, consulting, collegiate, etc. Where do you spend most of your time? I mean, apart from the competitive element of Gen.G, right? Winning that winner mentality and competing at the highest level, where are you spending most of your time in hunting down or creating and growing new revenue streams for the business, whether it's through one of those two verticals that you just mentioned or something that we haven't yet discussed?
Yeah. To touch on your earlier point of the sentence, I don't touch anything competitive. I'm the one furthest away from it. Like they don't let me anywhere near those decisions. Just because I'm not the guy, right? I'm not the guy. Like a lot of times I find out some moves that we made from like through public portals and stuff because I shouldn't be anywhere near that. If they win, it's great for business. That's what I focus on. But I spend most of my time, honestly, looking at a bird's eye view of the gaming industry, not esports. Okay, I think one thing that I credit a lot of the folks on our side is that we quickly said, "Hey, it's not about esports; it's about gaming." Right? Esports is sort of the flag that we fly under, but hey, the tip of the iceberg is esports. The much larger community is underneath that. And so one of the stats I remember when I first joined, I think it was page 5 of our deck. There's somebody, I don't know which source it was, but there was this big headline of esports will be a $1 billion industry by 2020. There was this thing, right? And if you keep reading underneath that, it says gaming is a $170 billion industry. So I'm like, hey, well, how come no one's talking about this? Like, this is a little bigger than 1 billion, right? And at the end of the day, it's
now.
Yeah, this is back in the 2020 article. The baseline, right? The audience of gamers is what feeds into esports. So why are we not talking about that? So to answer your question, Jimmy, I spend a lot of my time seeing just overall creative, cool things that are happening in the gaming industry. And my question is always, hey, can we do that? Can we try that? How would we do it, right? And then once we bake it out a little bit and it becomes a plausible idea, we go to a brand and we say, hey, no, check this out. Look what they did. I think we can make it better, cooler, or different if we do it this way. And a lot of times those ideas have sold. So,
Martin, is the implication of that statement that you sort of, and maybe this is a too callous way of saying it because I know you care, but like you sort of don't care if Gen.G esports teams win or lose. As the chief revenue officer, you're selling something much bigger than just the competitive, right? Is it fair to say that, or you do genuinely? Do you find winning genuinely has an impact on the bottom line?
It totally does. Winning, people like winning, right? No one likes losers, right? So one thing, I mean, even like let's just go back to my baseball days. The teams that win revenue are 5 times more than the teams that lose, and that's because brands, the whole basis of sports sponsorships, right, the sports marketing is the association of that feel good win, right? That's the reason why like a Coca-Cola will go to a winning team and say, we want to give you this much money because we want to associate our brand with winning. So at the core, winning wins. Let's just be honest. No one likes to put their name next to a losing org. So of course that helps us, and it helps me open up more doors when we say, hey, we've been top 10 League of Legends team for the past decade. That gets us a lot more street cred than not. So of course I'm always rooting for them. All I'm saying is I just trust that there's a much smarter people making the better decisions than me coming in there and daring to have a voice there. But yeah, of course it helps us overall if our team is performing because you get more headlines that way too.
Yeah, I'm trying to suss out what are the levers on sort of what has the biggest impact on revenue for an org like Gen.G, right? If one of the teams goes on this huge winning streak, is that more important than maybe losing, but you have a player on your team who has 20 million followers and he's a big superstar and draws a lot of headlines just to himself, even if Gen.G as a team is maybe not winning. I'm just trying to suss out what are the in your mind the levers that have an impact on your side of the business, the revenue generation side, that you have no control over, right? Obviously you're not playing, but that have an impact on your business.
Yeah, and you may not like this answer too, but it really comes down to what the client is looking for. Like if the brands that want eyeballs in this industry, they're already partnered with the big boys, right? The ones that get the millions of views, right? In Korea, for example, T1 and Gen.G, like we're like this 1-2 punch. And a lot of the brands that want the just the logo play, right? The ones that want, hey, we want as many eyeballs to see us and do us well. They'll just slap a name somewhere near Faker. And let's be honest, he's done that for brands, and that's why T1 is that successful, right? For us, it really we're a bit more strategic with our partners, and we kind of have deeper discussions up front as to, hey, what's your end goal here? What are you trying to achieve within this gaming space, and see if we can deliver that. Some of our sponsors have nothing to do with Gen.G, right? Can I mention some names? Am I allowed to do that? Okay,
Yeah,
for example, like McDonald's is one of our biggest partners, right? And you won't see them anywhere near, their logos are nowhere near our teams. Well, what we do for them is we operate McDonald's employee esports league, right? No one knows that, right? But we operate that. We're the engine behind it. So during COVID, they had they have an issue with staff retention, right? Because a lot of younger folks that work at different regions of McDonald's, they wouldn't last more than 3 or 4 months. So they did some homework, and they're like, oh, our demographic of our staff, a lot of them love to game. So why don't we take a page out of, like, back in the old school softball league, right? Why don't we take a page out of that? So we presented it to them. They loved it. So we started in Southern California. Now I think we run it in like 10 different regions around the country. And that keeps going. No one knows about it, and we were up for an award last year for it, because it's one of those that it's not a public-facing, like a headline-grabbing activation or sponsorship. But for McDonald's, it's serving their employees, and it's healthy. I mean, some of the testaments that we get from some of the regions is pretty cool. But so that has nothing to do with whether Gen.G does well, whether we would have a team or not. They don't care about that. It's more about, do we have the ability to deliver what they want to achieve?
It's super smart. I didn't know that. That's actually really cool for the McDonald's employees also. I'm curious, when we had Arnold on the show, one of the things he talked a little bit about, and this was his word, not mine, an esports winter. Where I think the way he categorized it was teams having to rethink how they generate revenue, how they succeed, and how they become viable, sustainable businesses, right? And I think what I loved about that discussion is he had real ideas about where some of these, revenue generating opportunities for esports teams should go, like revenue shares with publishers around digital assets, for example. And I'm curious, how much of your time are you spending thinking, maybe the McDonald's one's a perfect example of an answer to this question, thinking outside the box of not just the sponsor logo on the jersey, right? How much time are you thinking about what is the future of esports from a revenue standpoint, and how do you solve some of the problems a lot of teams other than Gen.G are having, frankly, right? Like, Gen.G, I think, is in the minority of having figured out a lot of interesting ways of generating revenue. And I'm curious, Martin, how much of your time you spend on this sort of outside the box thinking. Or do you agree with Arnold? Do you maybe not agree with his?
No. I laugh. I laugh because he coined that, and he brought it to us actually many months ago. Then we've been talking about it for as long as I can remember. But yeah, to your point, I think we're fortunate enough that we had that foresight, and we were always creative about, hey, let's not pigeonhole ourselves into one revenue stream or one vertical, where if that hits a hurdle, we're in trouble. So I think we prepared well for that. For me personally, thinking outside the box is what I do. That's all I wanted to do. And when I first came over, and again, wearing the MLB baseball hat and trying to make things fit into that template, and I keep getting jammed. And that's when I really made the pivot of saying, you know what, I got to start from scratch. I got to realize that it's really not that. That's why, when people talk about is esports a sport, I say, I don't care. It's because it's different. That's just why does that even matter, right? The biggest thing I always talk about is like in baseball or in the NBA, for example, like you can't have you say that, like, we have a bunch of friends that were playing baseball in a park. Major League Baseball can't come and say, hey, stop playing, I own this game. Like, nobody owns the IP of that sport, right? but in gaming, technically they could, right? Technically, if we're doing a tournament, and not that they would, and we're playing League, for example, technically Riot could be like, hey, guys, stop doing that because you're commercializing our game, take it down. Like that. And I was like, that was, for me, the biggest light bulb. It was like, yeah, but this third dimension that no one's talking about. So you have to think outside the box. Otherwise, they can shut anything down. So that's just one of those epiphanies that I had. So thinking outside the box on how we go to brands and how we have these conversations with potential partners, that's the very bread and butter of where we start with.
So what is your take then on, like, because this we talked about recently on the podcast, what's your take on like 100 Thieves launching an energy drink? And we don't have to make it targeted at 100 Thieves specifically. We could make it more general, but are these, in your mind, outside the box revenue streams or revenue opportunities for esports teams, or do you think this is not the right line of thinking in general?
Like I said earlier about how even Gen.G means 3 different things in 3 different markets, right? We have offices in Korea, China, and North America, and people know us as 3 different things. What I love about the esports community right now is that every big brand, right, the phases and the Thieves, the DSM, the Liquids, we also mean 10 different things to the market. And we've carved out sort of that identity. And I feel like as long as we are honest to ourselves of what our community wants from us, then it's going to work, right? There's so many smart people over there. I'm sure it wasn't on a whim. I'm sure it wasn't like, hey, how about an energy drink? Let's just try it out. I'm sure there were hours and hours and meetings to say, hey, would this work? Is it worth a try, right? Is it worth a squeeze? And that's probably why they're doing it. Even them creating a game. Like, it's so outside the box thinking, but I'm sure they did the proper analytics to say this may make sense for us, and that's why they're doing it. And I hope everything works for them. In the same way, as long as we know what we're good at, right? And there's still, while we compete on the stage, I always tell this when I talk to clients, while as an esports community we compete on the stage, from the business side, we're all kind of rooting for each other because we need this thing to work, right? We want every big move that the guys make, we want them to be successful. And if by chance some of them don't work out, we all together learn from that, right? In Korea, our LCK league, we're very close. We're very close, and we learn from each other and we help each other. Like whenever T1 and Gen.G meet in the finals, we are so happy for each other because everybody wins. Like the viewership goes, the Riot is super thrilled about it. Our sponsors love it. Like we intentionally sometimes even do like, hey, we're going to talk some smack, talk back, okay? Like we kind of engineer those things because like we all have to win as a business community before, otherwise that competitive thing might not even be there a couple years from now, right? So we are all trying to carve out our individual, plot of land, and I just want all of us to be really good at it.
It kind of ties back, Martin, to what you began our episode with, mentioning, a mobile game and a baseball activation and trying something new and seeing if that helps grow the community, cultivate an audience. I'm curious on what you can share, maybe along the lines of the McDonald's partnership, that like you said, no one had any idea to. What other forward-thinking trials can we expect at a Gen.G? Something that maybe is, again, not top secret, but perhaps not public knowledge, but that's okay to share with us if there is anything, whether it's exploring your IP in new ways, exploring Web3 and NFTs. I'm just curious, what if you can share something fun that we can expect out of Gen.G over the next year.
Man, there's two things. One is, and I think this isn't any top secret, but we've always been really bullish on the intersection of gaming and education. In Korea, we have a full-on academy, right? Like this past semester, we had 13 graduates from our academy go to U.S. universities, and one of them got even offered a full ride to be an esports student athlete at the U.S. university. So that was a thesis that we tried to prove from about 3-4 years ago, and we're going all in on that, right? And our motto is not making gamers better gamers, rather making gamers better students. And we're going to hang our entire hat on that because we do believe globally, man, the more you peel back, like every student coming up, I mean, between 13 and 15 to high school level, like they're all playing some kind of game. usually gamers have generally a high IQ. Let's take this passion of theirs and not say, hey, label them as quote unquote nerds, or like you're playing PS5 in the mom's basement. Not that. We're dealing with a very different kind of student that's extremely brilliant, and take that passion and see, hey, how can you leverage this, right? And then jokingly we called it like, let's become the Legos of the 80s and 90s, right? Like we all thought Legos was a toy, but that actually fueled the creativity and sort of the engineering mind of that generation. So in the same way, let's take their passion for gaming and convert it into something else, make them better people, make them better students. And that's why we're carving out that part of the ecosystem. And again, it's big enough. I mean, I'm sharing this because we're not like secretive about it. It's out there. And then we're just trying to create something really good for the community. And the second thing is more about, we just launched this crazy partnership with Mobile One to enter Rocket League, right? So the start of that conversation was the same as everything else. Okay, you guys are interested in esports. What do you want to achieve there? And what can we provide? And as we head into this, I don't want to see the esports winter, but we are sort of in a downtrend economy, right? Marketers are going to be a little more conservative and only doing things that really pay off for them. I feel like, man, we hit something there with what can we do more as a joint partnership? Not so much like, hey, we go first and then you put your brand on there. Instead, is, hey, what can we do together? And if we win, we hit a home run. It kind of, so I feel like that creative thinking might get us through this. I call it the winter. It's really not a winter, but anyway, kind of getting us to the next stage of our industry. But outside the box thinking for us has worked.
Martin, I have one last question for you before I pass it back to Jimmy here. But what is your view on the future? Like, give me the 5-year outlook for Gen.G specifically, obviously, but also where are we going in terms of like, what does the industry look like 5 years from now from a revenue mix standpoint, right? Will media rights sort of come up to the point where it's significant for esports teams, or do you think that's not going to happen? Is it digital assets that are going to, generate way more revenue? Is it, merchandise and energy drinks and things like? What does the revenue mix look like 5 years from now, industry wide, and maybe specifically for Gen.G in your mind?
I don't know, man. I guess this answer might get edited out because I don't have that answer. I don't know.
Your best guess. You're closer to this than anyone else. The big industry trend in your mind.
I think the big industry trend is that there's going to be less doing more. Meaning, I think sort of how this Valorant thing is sort of developing, right? It's sort of now before we didn't really have a roadmap, right? We didn't know what works. A lot of it was by chance, but just seeing how now you can almost crack, because I'm not going to name names, but let's look at some of the big esports that were around 3 years ago that are nowhere to be found now. Like that's not good. That's not good for business, right? You can't have this up and down by title. So rather, we have to start creating a more established ecosystem or more established infrastructure, because brands don't want to be a trend. Brands don't want to be like, oh, it was good while it was there. Oh, too bad it's gone now, right? Like as a brand, you don't want that. So you want to establish yourself with this community, especially because they're so young. The idea is join them young and write it out, right? That's the entire pitch here. So I feel like in terms of the competitive side, the infrastructure has to be a little more solidified so that it's not really riding the waves of a popularity of a certain game. And on the revenue side, I just feel like, because even in the past 4 years I've been here, a lot of the brands that were really heavy in esports then they're not around now. They kind of got burnt, right? So I feel like the certain brands that are going to be more long-term minded are going to be doing bigger things than like the one-stop shop kind of a partnership. But again, if you want to cut this out, that's fine, because I know it's not a really good answer.
No, is the implication that the big names in esports today, right, like Gen.G, will attract a greater percentage of the dollars 5 years from now? Like, do you think there's consolidation and sort of there's maybe fewer big winners as opposed to sort of money being spread everywhere?
Yeah, I can probably say within 5 years, I think it'll be a little more structured. I don't want to use the word league, but it's going to be, probably max 10 to 15 more solid, larger organizations that all play in all of the relevant games. And are able to figure out how to keep this thing going forward. Just because I think now, there's a reason why a lot of these hard pivots are happening is that, orgs are realizing that just being in one title, or I mean, the competitive esports itself is not a profitable model. I mean, that's not rocket science. Like it's a fact, right? So that's why unless you have more of them, it's kind of like, one of my buddies owns a Subway, a franchise, and he didn't make a lot of money until he owned 5.
Yeah, interesting.
And it's almost like that. Like, if you are going to go all in on one shop, it's going to be hard, and then you're highly dependent and tied to the success of that title. And what happens if that title, for some reason, takes a turn, right? So I do feel like a lot of the orgs that are able to field and sort of hedge the market are going to have much longer vision and longer term success.
And the education thing is such I think, a competitive advantage for you guys. That if you can crack that sort of at massive scale, I think is such a huge opportunity, right? There's obviously challenges there, but I think that's such a massive nut to crack, and access to millions and millions of students who are gamers, to me is really a holy grail. So I think that's a very interesting piece of the business. This brings us to everyone's favorite new segment, guys. It's not so new anymore, but it's Judge Jimmy's cross-examination. If you're new here, the way it works, Judge Jimmy's going to ask a few rapid-fire questions. They're easy questions, Martin. The idea is to get to know you a bit better as a person, and they're rapid fire, so they're quick and easy. Judge Jimmy, take it away.
All right, Martin, out of respect for your time, I'm going to keep it, I think, to 2 questions, but one overarching insight. World Series, Phillies or Astros, who you got, how many games? Give us some insight here to your old life.
I say Phillies in 6.
Phillies in 6. You heard it here first. Martin Kim, Gen.G, Phillies in 6.
But I don't know if you know, I grew up in Philly, so it's a really it's a bias.
That's totally biased.
Yeah, I grew up in Philadelphia, so I mean, and I worked for the Dodgers when they lost to Houston, so
it's definitely a sore spot for sure.
Yes.
Well, Martin, thanks so much for joining us today. I think this was the type of interview that we could have made into 3 or 4 interviews, so we're going to have you back. But back to you, Paul.
Martin, how do you like to be followed, found? How can people find you, follow you, what you're doing, reach out to you?
One beautiful thing about the gaming industry, everyone's so damn tech savvy that whoever wants to find me, they always do. But usually nowadays, like LinkedIn is probably the easiest thing. I'm not very active on Twitter, again, because I think it's tied to the fact that I'm not a big gamer, but I never really caught on to the busyness of Twitter. But LinkedIn might be the easiest way, since we are talking to more of a business audience here. But if you need to find me, I'm sure you can track me down. Yeah.
Martin, really appreciate it. So much insight. Like Jimmy said, we could have easily made a 3-hour episode here, and really appreciate having you on. Jimmy, thank you as always. Just a bit of housekeeping for our listeners. Make sure to subscribe to Business of Esports everywhere. YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. We have content on all these platforms. It's all different. Really appreciate you guys listening. Don't forget the most important thing, guys. The future is fun. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.